Good afternoon, dear friends and colleagues. On behalf of the network of four Centers for Christian-Muslim Relations, NCCMR, I warmly welcome you all to today's public lecture. We are honored to host Monsignor Michael Nazir Ali, whose distinguished scholarship, leadership, and long-standing engagement in Christian-Muslim relations have enriched both academic and public conversations across continents. We are especially grateful that he also serves as a member of the network's advisory board. It's a privilege to have him with us today. For those joining NCCMR for the first time, please allow me to briefly introduce our work. The network was launched in March 24 by scholar leaders with support from Templeton Religion Trust. It brings together distinguished centers across Africa, Asia, and the MENA region that have demonstrated sustained commitment to Christian-Muslim relations within their contexts. As we speak today, we have 28 centers from 19 different countries. Our vision is a world in which Christian-Muslim relations are marked by mutual understanding, respect, and collaboration for a culture of peace. And we work to connect individuals and institutions, share knowledge, exchange lived experience, and cultivate a spirit of mutual learning and curiosity. We do not seek to create a melting pot, but rather to celebrate diversity while strengthening theological literacy, cross-culture competence, and cooperative engagement. Among our major initiatives are the online diploma in Christian-Muslim relations, designed to equip clergy and practitioners for serious theological engagements, and our annual symposium on Christian-Muslim relations, which will be held this year in Amman, Jordan, is also a great opportunity for all of us to connect. We warmly invite you to consider participating in these programs. For further information about the diploma, the symposium in Amman, and all of the programs we are running, please visit nccmr.org, nccmr.org. In a moment, my colleague, Dr. Ghassan, will formally introduce our distinguished speaker. But just to let you know, during the lecture, we encourage all of you to place your questions and comments in the Q&A box. We will reserve time at the end of our discussion to entertain the questions. Thank you again for joining. We look forward to a rich and thoughtful session together.
Thank you, Raji, and greetings to our audience, wherever they may be. And I wish our Muslim colleagues and friends a blessed and a rewarding Ramadan, inshallah. I welcome you all to the fourth fourth webinar in our series of webinars on Christian-Muslim relations. This one being on the role of religion in conflict and peacemaking. It is a distinct pleasure to introduce Monsignor Dr. Michael Nazir Ali. Monsignor Nazir Ali served as Bishop of Rochester for 15 years until 2009. He is originally from Southwest Asia and was the first diocesan bishop in the Church of England, born abroad. Before that, he was the General Secretary of Church Mission Society and Bishop of Rawalpindi in Pakistan. He is now a priest of the Ordinariate of Our Lady of Walsingham. He holds both British and Pakistani citizenship, and since 1999 has been serving as member of the House of Lords. He has both a Christian and a Muslim family background, and is now president of the Oxford Centre for Training, Research, Advocacy, and Dialogue, Oxtrad. Monsignor, I look forward to hearing you. The floor is yours. Please.
Well, thank you very much for that generous introduction, and I apologize that you can't see me. Perhaps that's good for you that you can't see me. I look forward very much to the interaction afterwards. And as Dr. Ghassan has wished the Muslim listeners a blessed Ramadan, I would also like to wish our Christian participants Blessed Lent. And then after that, of course, the Feast of the Resurrection. So Dr. Ghassan has said what the topic of my talk this afternoon is. And what we will try to do in this is, first of all, to describe the role of religion in society in terms of cohesion, where it can provide a spiritual and moral glue for a particular society, but also its prophetic aspect, where it can challenge the state of society and the direction society or some elements in it may be taking. We will then consider how religion can go wrong and fuel conflict between religious and ethnic groups within nations or indeed between nations. Examples will be given from the Middle Ages, early modern Europe, and contemporary nationalisms in Asia and Europe. Religion can also be a powerful force for making and maintaining peace between groups and nations. This can arise directly from religious conviction, or it can be the result of patient dialogue between representatives of religious traditions as to how their tradition encourages or even requires them to work for peace, whether locally, nationally, or internationally. So in all of this, we will give particular attention to the so-called Abrahamic faiths because of their global reach and because also they are a factor in conflict as well as in peacemaking in so many parts of the world. So we will discuss the accountability of religious traditions in the context of interreligious dialogue in the media and in the public square, regarding their role in promoting fundamental freedom, good stewardship of the natural world, working to bring conflict to an end, and promoting peace and collaboration amongst diverse ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic groups. Now, we need to begin by saying that, of course, for believers, spiritual experience is something that is deeply personal. It has to do with a person's experience of the transcendent and with allegiance and adherence to a community of faith, with its beliefs and its practices, its rituals, and its fasts and its feasts, of course. Such experience is hugely important and merits close study of its nature and claims. Our task this afternoon, however, is to consider religion as a social, even political expression of the spiritual, and to ask what importance it has in the causes of conflict and whether it can promote peace between different groups and nations. So the social function of religion first. Sociologists since Emil Durkheim have long recognized the social function of religion, where it has been thought to be the glue which has held societies together, providing cohesion necessary for a society to function effectively. It is true that in doing this, sociologists have sometimes concentrated on religion as symbol and ritual rather than the experience which is most important for believers. As I have said, however, the importance of such a view lies in seeing religion as providing the basis for moral order, social solidarity, and justification for conflict when it does occur, as also value for suffering endured for the sake of social survival or well-being. More recently, some sociologists have claimed that religion is no longer necessary in certain societies because its social functions have been taken over by the state or voluntary organizations, and that democracy, rather than a transcendent moral order, provides all the legitimation that is needed socially. This view, for instance, is promoted by Brian Wilson in his landmark work, Religion in Sociological Perspective. The view of those schools of thought, such as sociologie religieuse in France, which are interested in the continuing role of religion in society, these views are dismissed as unscientific because they refuse to accept the basic assumptions of those who believe in the inexorable secularization of societies alongside industrialization and globalization. Brian Wilson, whom I've just referred to, a representative, very eminent British sociologist, in his classic work has claimed that sociology is a product of Western civilization. Such a statement can, of course, be challenged in a number of ways. But to take just one example, there seems complete unawareness of the work of scholars like Ibn Khaldun, the great North African social historian, 1332 to 1406, who is sometimes regarded as the father of sociology. Is this because Western scholarship is unable to conceive of a medieval Muslim who could write in terms of cause and effect, of drawing universal conclusions on the basis of observable phenomena, and who could discuss change in terms of social dynamics and not as directly willed by God? With Ibn Khaldun, however, such commitment to objectivity goes hand in hand with acknowledging religion as important for social organization. His account of asabiya, or social cohesion, Professor Akbar Ahmed tells us, is based on a spiritual view of the world and of human society. According to the Quran, human beings are God's representatives on earth, Quran 2:30, and human social organization must reflect this trusteeship. So neglect of people like Ibn Khaldun is not dissimilar to that of Christian-based religious sociology, labeled unscientific by those who claim to adopt a value-free approach, but whose values are in fact undeclared. So what are the limits of the modern state that is so much being promoted by some sociologists? The much vaunted effectiveness of the modern state is limited to the provision of material benefits and to providing security and freedom for its citizens so that they can live as they choose. In providing these, the state assumes certain givens like the inalienable dignity of the person, equality and liberty, which it has acquired from a moral tradition which is not merely utilitarian. So, for example, the American Declaration of Independence says it is self-evident that people have been endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights and unalienable dignity. It is often claimed that the modern state is effective in what it delivers, but we are not told in what areas it is effective. Even in its limited domain, without the acquisition of values such as human dignity, equality, and liberty, which have spiritual roots, the state cannot deliver in important areas of human life. When equipped with these values, it can create the conditions for friendship, community, neighborliness, and care. But it cannot manufacture these since they arise from people's worldview, spiritual life, and moral values. So is there going to be a return to seeing religion as a cohesive force of society? The Austro-American sociologist Peter Berger, who had been a disciple of Max Weber, had begun to see already in the 1960s the futility of a value-free approach. According to him, it tended towards an implicit atheism and to marginalize the role of religion in society. He began to identify what he called signals of transcendence, which can be identified in any human situation, For example, the propensity towards order and a corresponding fear of disorder. In religious terms, such an inclination is seen as reflecting the order of the cosmos itself, a transcendent order which supports human attempts at ordering family, community, and national life. It is not that all such attempts at order are perfect or even justifiable. It is rather the instinct for order that is itself remarkable. Just to say that it is built into us to ensure the survival of the species is not enough, because the question then arises as to why, in a random and unordered universe, that should be so. Berger also mentions hope as another of his signals of transcendence. Whether our eschatology is secular or religious, we are all oriented towards the future, both with regard to our own expectations and the well-being of the groups to which we feel we belong. Such a view of the future depends on a view of time which is, as in the Bible, linear rather than cyclical, and genuinely open to change and development. Berger also mentions our innate sense of justice and outrage at injustice as another of these signals, as are, of course, he says, art, music, sport, and even our sense of humor. Alistair McIntyre has shown how so-called value-neutral approaches to history and sociology have resulted in a kind of moral and spiritual amnesia. According to him, the canons of the social sciences will allow the charting of spiritualities and moral systems, one after the other, but will not permit the identifying of those which tend towards greater personal, familial, and social integration, and which point more towards disorder and disintegration. Such a paradigm of mere study without evaluation results in a spiritual and cultural relativism which refuses to affirm what is beneficial in a particular tradition or to disapprove of dispositions and behaviors which damage the social fabric of the family, community, or nation. It is well known that McIntyre goes on to advocate the emergence of new forms of moral and spiritual communities where virtue-based living is possible and valued. In fact, personally, I think a dual approach may be possible, where belonging to such defined communities enables and even heightens a contribution to wider society, which may be indifferent or hostile to the values being lived and promoted by these communities. McIntyre points to the need for a new Saint Benedict, evoking the Benedictine rejection of a decaying and decadent social order and resistance to an encroaching barbarism. To this we could add the conservation of whatever was valuable from the past and the dissemination of learning and culture. To be, in other words, a light in the darkness to which men and women would be drawn for enlightenment, safety, and fellowship. Whatever the dissolvents at work in different societies, it remains true that historically, and in many parts of the world today, religion has been the basis for social cohesion and lies at the root of most moral traditions. It can, of course, be conceded at once that non-religious people can act morally, even altruistically, and that they sometimes can be better morally informed than religious people. The issue, nevertheless, is whether religion can give a better account of the rise of moral awareness and of fundamental moral principles, such as the primacy of conscience, the equal dignity of all humans, and our sense of duty. As even Immanuel Kant recognized, such an account can best be given by an appeal to a supreme being, who is both the ground for such ideas and the one who brings about their vindication, if not in this life, then in the next. Religion and its accompanying moral tradition are also related to the emergence and development of law. We must, of course, distinguish between religion and law, and even morals and law. What may be spiritually and morally desirable is not always suitable for legislation. There is nevertheless a real connection between moral and spiritual values and law. Our estimates of the human person, of justice, compassion, and human relationships, which are required in lawmaking, are often grounded in a religious and moral worldview. Indeed, if law is to be effective, it must be seen to be well grounded morally. In the long run, neither the slavish following of public opinion nor mere coercion will be adequate. So, religion and public life. Religious beliefs, practices, and values are also often related to the emergence and development of national and community institutions. Monarchy, government by consent in various forms, civic bodies, voluntary organizations, and institutes of higher education can often appeal to a religious foundation or claim religious inspiration or justification. Even where there's been intentional separation of the state from any one form of religious expression, as in the United States of America, the foundational documents can still invoke transcendental beliefs and values, created equal, endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, and so on. It may be that in the course of time, the religious basis of social and political institutions is eroded, in some cases to the point of becoming vestigial. At key points, however, it serves to remind those in authority that their authority is not self-generated, but it has its basis in a higher realm to which it is also accountable. In the United Kingdom, for example, the coronation as a service of consecration, prayers in parliament, oath-taking, chapels in colleges and hospitals and prisons, each in a different way testifies to the role of religion in social organization. As Callum Brown, the sociologist, notes, even in a rapidly secularizing context, nothing has replaced religious discourse in public life. No new religion, no new credo, no ideology, not even some kind of state-sponsored secularism. The dangers of deliberately creating a spiritual and moral vacuum in national life by removing the remaining signs of the spiritual from public life are obvious to many and to us. What might fill such a vacuum in a world of competing religions and ideologies? So the prophetic element in public life, so far we have concentrated on the cohesive aspect of religion in society. In the Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions particularly, there is another aspect of it to the fore. This may be called the prophetic. Walter Brueggemann, a scholar of the Hebrew Bible, tells us that the prophetic is about nurturing, nourishing, and evoking a consciousness and perception alternative to those of the dominant culture. Such a consciousness will critique an order which exploits and oppresses groups of people because of their ethnic, religious, or class origin. It will criticize the refusal of God's offer of newness by clinging on to privilege, and it will energize the community so it can live on with hope towards the future. Brueggemann sees Moses as the paradigmatic prophet who brings into being an alternative community which rejects the false hierarchical system of Egypt and is formed as a people and nation by continually recognizing that it was God who brought them out of slavery in Egypt. With Jeremiah, the truly prophetic spirit will grieve at the faithfulness of the existing order, and therefore its self-inflicted approaching destruction. But it will also sow and nurture seeds of hope in a coming liberation. For him, the cross of Jesus is the ultimate criticism of injustice, prejudice, and oppression. just as his resurrection is par excellence that which energizes towards a hopeful future. Where Islam is concerned, its prophet's initial proclamation of the one God, Allah, who is just himself and requires justice in society, brought about a hostile reaction from the elite of his home city of Mecca, whose prosperity was threatened by such a prophetic proclamation. The city's prosperity seems to have been built on popular pilgrimages and the cult of the so-called daughters of Allah, Allat, Al-Manat, and Al-Uzza, as well as of other gods. A particularly exploitative form of usury was also practiced, and there were other social evils, such as the exposure of female children, which outraged Muhammad and were condemned by him. Such a prophetic element has repeatedly revealed itself in the course of Islamic history. In the revolt of the Kharijites who rejected the emergence of a hereditary and worldly caliphate, or in those Sufis who realized that religion was simply being used to uphold and to prolong a particular political and social order. In the 19th and 20th centuries also, Muslim reformers like Afghani have criticized corruption and exploitation of their own times. It seems true that much of the energy of resurgent Islam, both moderate and extreme, arises from such a prophetic view of the relation of religion to society. It needs saying that while Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are especially prophetic in their origin and orientation, other traditions, such as the Indic, may also display prophetic elements. This is manifestly true, for example, of Sikhism, which has emerged in history as a result of vigorous interaction between the bhakti or devotional tradition within Hinduism and the preaching of the Sufis. This interreligious interaction led to a kind of non-sectarian devotionalism, which lies at the root of the Sikh founder Guru Nanak's teaching. His teaching emphasizes monotheism and a personal knowledge of God, but also lays stress on a rejection of caste distinction and on commensality. Much earlier in the Indic tradition, the Buddha himself, drawing on anti-caste traditions within Hinduism, had proclaimed social equality. Buddhist belief in the need to eliminate suffering can also bring Buddhists to resist injustice and oppression, which cause or increase suffering. Their belief that it is desire which causes much suffering can lead them to warn against unbridled consumerism, and their commitment to ahimsa or non-violence should lead them to be advocates of peace and of seeking change through non-violent means. The renewal of the prophetic. It is the case, of course, that religious traditions as they have developed historically do not always fulfill their prophetic vocation. There are temptations to compromise with the powerful and the wealthy. They can also provide support for the existing order without asking whether it is unjust. Sometimes, however, there can be a renewal of the prophetic within a particular tradition. This can come about because of the work of a charismatic individual like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, or it can be a response to political and economic circumstances in which the poor find themselves, as with the emergence of various theologies of liberation in different parts of the world. At its best, the prophetic aspect of religion can empower individuals and groups such as the Dalit in India, making it possible for them to affirm their identity and dignity in ways denied to them in the past. It can provide the means for criticizing an unjust social and political milieu, and it can give the poor and powerless tools to mobilize and to challenge the privileged and the wealthy. It can bring about attitudes of critical solidarity towards one's national or communal context, where loyalty is not shown by uncritical subservience, but by asking critical questions regarding justice, privilege, and equality before the law. Does religion cause conflict? An estimate of the various aspects of religion, such as the one given above, can lead to people asking if it is more an apology for religious belief than a critique of it, and that it does not correspond to the experience of many who see it rather as the cause of conflict in families, local communities, and within and between nations. They may well ask how this aspect of religion, which they may claim is its only side, is to be evaluated. It is certainly the case that religious belief and formal aspects of religion have sometimes been and still are a significant aspect of many conflicts. In the West, people often associate the so-called wars of religion with a great deal of suffering in Middle Europe, and for many the Peace of Westphalia of 1648 marks the dawn of modern times, at least in political terms. At this time, the principle of non-interference on religious grounds was established and people were recognized as citizens regardless of religious affiliation. The ensuing privatization of religion was to make sure that religion could not be a major element in conflict between nations. To what extent this was successful can, of course, be debated. What Westphalia did was to restrict public engagement to formal rules of conduct and to denude the public square of any commitment to beliefs from which moral and spiritual values arise, and thus to impoverish public discourse. As far as the so-called wars of religion are concerned, it is not at all clear whether the conflicts were only or even mainly due to religion. It seems there were many other factors involved, including national interest, political intrigue, and envy of ecclesiastical property. What about the Crusades? Taking another well-known example, the Crusades were called because pilgrims from Europe to the Holy Land were being obstructed by the Seljuks. The somewhat unhinged Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim had wantonly destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, as well as, of course, many Muslim holy places. And the Eastern Roman Emperor Alexius Comnenus was appealing directly to Pope Urban II for assistance as the Seljuk armies were overrunning his Asian territories. When Urban called the first of the Crusades, these were all factors in his mind. But he may also have been glad to divert the attention of the knights and soldiers of Europe towards fighting the Turks and Arabs in the Middle East rather than one another in Europe itself. There were barbarities and cruelties on all sides, and the Crusaders often forgot their original mission in their thirst for land and plunder. I sometimes remind colleagues that the Crusades were never solely directed against Muslim Turks and Arabs. There was one against Christian Byzantium itself, which arguably weakened it and opened the way for Constantinople to fall in 1453. There were also crusades against the Jews and the Albigensians, and one proposed even against the Protestant powers during the conflicts of the 16th century. The Lebanese writer Amin Malouf has extracted from contemporary Arab sources the Arab-Muslim view of the Crusades. As with Christian accounts, it is of course biased, but it does establish that the Eastern Christians suffered at the hands of the Crusaders, that some of the crusading armies were barbaric in their treatment of conquered populations, and that the overall result of the Crusades was to weaken the position of Christianity in the East. Once again, we find that religion is an important element in the conflict, but there were many others, such as both Turkish and European desire for land, the need to secure Western Europe from further Muslim inroads, and to divert conflict away from Europe towards the Middle East. So in view of this, I ask whether Semitic religions of Semitic origin are particularly prone to involvement in conflict. Sometimes it is said that religions of Semitic origin, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are particularly prone to being involved in conflict. This is not to excuse them, but we have to note that in both the Hindu epics, the Mahabharata, of which the Bhagavad Gita is part, and the Ramayana, religion is used to justify participation in conflict. The Emperor Ashoka, until his conversion to Buddhism, was engaged in wars of conquest, and even Buddhism could not prevent wars of conquest and succession in the kingdoms of Southeast Asia. Today also we see a kind of militant nationalism with Buddhist overtones in countries like Sri Lanka and Myanmar. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb rolled back the policies of his more tolerant forebears in his attempt to turn the Mughal Empire into an Islamic state with the strict enforcement of Sharia or Islamic law as he understood it. He ordered all newly built Hindu temples to be torn down, jizya or the poll tax on non-Muslims was restored, and various military campaigns were undertaken against infidel areas of the empire. One of these against the Sikhs resulted in the capture and execution of their leader, the ninth Guru, Tegh Bahadur, causing enduring bitterness among the Sikhs. Aurangzeb's actions were responsible for transforming the Sikhs into a militarily effective people prepared to combat what they saw as Mughal aggression and oppression. British imperial policies and the growth of communal consciousness. Whether intentionally or not, certain British imperial policies in India, such as the introduction and extension of separate electorates for religious communities, led to the strengthening of communal identities in which religion was a significant ingredient. Each socio-religious community developed its own political organization, and this became a basis for different kinds of religious nationalism. The Muslim form of it came to be expressed in the demand for Pakistan, a separate homeland for the Muslims of India. Not to be left behind, the Sikh kind turned into the struggle for Khalistan, a homeland for the Sikh community. We are now seeing the resurgence of Hindu nationalism, which sees India as a homeland for Hindus and questions the loyalty of communities like the Muslim and the Christian if they do not endorse this vision and accept that at least culturally they have to be Hindus as well. Is this the end of India's much celebrated secularism, which guaranteed freedom of religion and which respected religious views without being identified with any one of them? So religion and nationalist chauvinism is amongst us. The mix of religion with communal and nationalist chauvinism that we are currently witnessing in post-Gandhian India is not, of course, limited to it. I had occasion to be in Bosnia during the civil war there. I had gone on behalf of Christian Aid to see whether we could work with Islamic relief without regard to creed or confession. In the event, this proved more difficult than we had anticipated because communities were so sharply divided and there was much bitterness on every side. We discovered at close quarters how closely identified religion and ethnicity had become. The Muslims, for instance, resembled the Serbs and the Croats in many respects, but were distinguished by their religious identity, which in some cases extended only to their name and a dim memory of their ancestry. The dominant feature of the ethno-religious landscape was the identification of Serb nationhood with the Orthodox Church, and the extreme expression of such a consciousness was shown in the attempted ethnic cleansing of Muslims from Serb areas and beyond. In Kosovo, on the other hand, the situation was characterized with Muslims being in the majority and the Serbs a minority. A more recent visit to the region has confirmed for me my sense that religion and ethnicity represent a potent mixture, which, if not properly addressed, could once again result in conflagration. The re-emergence of Sobernost as a unifying and re-energizing principle among the Russian people, with its recognition of the spiritual and moral dimension of community life, can be a welcome development. If, however, orthodoxy is seen as being intrinsic to being Russian, this does raise questions about the place of other ethnic groups, other churches, and other religions in post-Soviet Russia. Such questions remain unsettled and seem to be growing in intensity with the passage of time. The conflict in Ukraine, which has geopolitical dimensions related to great power interests beyond the scope of what I'm saying today, reveals nevertheless the desire for solidarity among Russian-speaking people, wherever they may be, and a chauvinistic memory that it is Russians rather than Ukrainians who truly represent the historical consequences of the baptism of Kiev. Sobernos can thus be seen to have both a positive and a negative aspect. So, like other fundamentals of human life, religion can also go wrong. We see, therefore, that for good and bad reasons, religion has contributed and continues to contribute to conflict at different levels and of various kinds. We can agree also that religion can and does go wrong. If spiritual or religious awareness is innate in us, then like other aspects of being human, it will be possible for it to be distorted and to become pathological. Our capacity for love, for example, is one of the noblest features of humanity. It can be characterized by selflessness, sacrifice, and care. But if it goes wrong, turning inwards on itself, it can wreak havoc in our personal lives, damage or even destroy others, and cause immense suffering for families and communities. Patriotism or love for our country is noble and to be admired. As social creatures, we need to belong, and one way of belonging is being part of a people or nation. Such a sense of solidarity can make for the common good, provided it is not turned in on itself, becomes excluding and exclusive, or promotes xenophobia and fear of the other. We have witnessed how all of this can happen and is happening, jeopardizing regional and world peace and putting minorities at risk. Just as love and patriotism can go wrong, to name but two of the most valued human commitments, so can religion. From the point of view of a Christian anthropology, there's nothing in the human condition which is not capable of rising to the heights. But at the same time, everything is also touched by the possibility of going wrong. Other religious traditions will no doubt have similar analyses of human nature. Here, Reinhold Niebuhr's comment about democracy is apt. The human capacity for justice makes democracy possible, and the inclination to injustice makes it necessary. As with other fundamentals of humanity, our experience of the pathological in religion should not blind us to its existence, nor to its capacity to inspire and encourage men and women to selflessness, service, and sacrifice. So, what is good religion? Religion is often the catalyst and even the agent for reconciliation and peacemaking. The lay-led St. Egidio community in Rome is dedicated to the work of making peace between warring groups and has been recognized for its role in peacemaking, for example, in the civil war in Mozambique. The courageous Maslaha movement in Israel-Palestine is dedicated to seeking reconciliation between Jews, Muslims, and Christians in a polarized and dangerous situation. And the famous Alexandria Declaration on Peace in the Holy Land came about through the initiative of Muslim, Jewish, and Christian leaders. It is well known that religious leaders like the Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Catholic Archbishop Stephen Naidu led the fight against apartheid in South Africa at a time when most of the political leadership was imprisoned or exiled. In many parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, churches and other religious groups are engaged in the struggle for the poor to have access to justice and to have their basic needs like employment, housing, and food met by sometimes reluctant regimes and elites. Organizations from a variety of religious backgrounds have been involved for centuries in delivering education and healthcare to those who otherwise would have only marginal access to these facilities. We can agree then that religions can go wrong and cause suffering in the world, but so can secular ideologies. It can be argued, for example, that National Socialism, Marxism, Maoism, and nationalist chauvinism have caused more large-scale human suffering than religion has ever done. So I end with asking about the scope and purpose of interfaith dialogue today in this context. It is true that the Jewish people, out of all proportion to their numbers, have had a huge influence on public and personal morality, either directly through their sense of an educational and moral mission in the world, or through the agency of the Christian churches, which have taken the moral message of the Hebrew Bible and Jesus' understanding of it all over the world. Islam also has many points of contact with this moral tradition. The Jewish people cannot therefore be excluded from dialogue about justice and peace in our world today. It is, however, the two great missionary religions of our day, Islam and Christianity, which bear the greatest burden in ensuring a peaceful and just international order. Dialogue between them is essential so that each side can discover and appreciate the beliefs and commitments of the other. It is important that each should know about the spiritual experience which lies at the root of the practice of religion of the other, and it is most desirable that they should cooperate in the building and prospering of local communities. Most crucially, such dialogue has to be more and more about the mutual recognition and respect for fundamental human freedoms, including freedom of belief, expression, and the freedom to change our beliefs, and the expression of them in public or in private. In other words, this dialogue will only make progress if there is a common recognition of Article 18 of the Human Declaration of Human Rights. I have been privileged to be part of such dialogue in different parts of the world, and it is most rewarding to see how different traditions draw out commitments to human freedoms from their own documents and practices. All religions, and particularly Islam and Christianity, because they represent more than half of all humanity, are accountable at the bar of world opinion, and indeed in the context of dialogue with one another. It cannot be acceptable any longer for religious people to claim that a matter of basic human rights is an internal matter which they should be allowed to address on their own. The world rightly wishes to hold us to account, and we should be willing to give an account of how our beliefs determine our treatment of others, to the world, and to our partners in dialogue. There is no time now for kissy-kissy dialogue, where we pat each other on the back and return content that we have done something valuable. Today, dialogue has to be about the realities of our world and how religious belief is upholding or endangering basic human freedoms. From such dialogue will emerge a view of religion as a force for justice, freedom, and equality. So, we have considered the role of religion in society in both its cohesive and prophetic aspects. We have noted how religions can be compromised, corrupted, and become an ingredient in conflict, but we've also seen that such compromise and corruption is not unique to religion, but applies to many other fundamentals of human experience. Much conflict, similarly, is caused not by religion, but by ideology, tyranny, or the greed for territory and scant resources. Religion does, however, have an obligation to promote reconciliation, peace, and justice. Such a responsibility should be an important aspect of inter-religious dialogue, and religion should be prepared to give an account of their commitment in these respects to one another and to world opinion. Thank you for your patience and for listening so well.
Thanks most of all to you, Monsignor Nazir Ali, for a very dense and very stimulating, very rich lecture. I personally enjoyed it tremendously. I thank you again. Please, for the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A. Awaiting that and abusing my privileges as a moderator, allow me to pose a question. You spoke of the material benefits of the state, or the duties of the state in providing material benefits, rather, providing security, and the things that it cannot deliver, or directly deliver, such as friendships, neighborliness, meaning, in other words, human meaning. But then I wonder, what would be your comment on states that around the beginning of this millennium became aware of elements like spiritual security? I'm talking about Russia, establishing institutions that defend, in their vocabulary, the population against moral incursions from the West and from liberal powers, or institutions of patriotic education in China, where they, as you know very well, try to provide this citizen with this sense of meaning by embedding it in a kind of a communal sense. Something Europe did before the Second World War, where the politician had the liberty of providing ethical or moral guidance to the population. How do we balance between a Western order that values liberal, or its liberty rather, and freedom, and us who, meaning the religious or the spiritual, who do see value in the tradition? There's tension pulling us, given what the other is doing and given the nature of our community. How do you suggest we proceed as religious people living in liberal societies?
Yes, I mean, the first thing is that secularism itself, the values that it says that it holds, it has actually ultimately derived from religious tradition. I mean, particularly the Judeo-Christian tradition in this respect. And scholars like Tom Holland and others are now identifying this and saying, well, even the most secular of values actually have their roots in some kind of religious and moral tradition. Secondly, I think that a false move was made at the time of the Enlightenment in Europe with regard to reason. So reason was given an overly individualistic interpretation, that a so-called imaginary individual could reason his or her way into believing everything that needed to be believed. But we know that this is not the case, that in fact moral traditions are cumulative. They develop over many centuries, and people's moral values derive from that kind of collective memory. You gave the example of Russia. Of course, what happened there was, first of all, a very violent disruption in that cumulativeness of a moral and spiritual tradition, and an attempt to exterminate that tradition. That proved unsuccessful, and so the Russian people once again have realized their deep-rootedness in their moral and spiritual tradition. There are some very good aspects to that. Sobernost, I was talking to you earlier about that. And the revival of religious belief in Russia is nothing short of a miracle for those of us who remember the days of the Soviet Union. But having said that, this has to be held alongside a commitment to fundamental freedoms, which are also God-given, as the American Declaration recognizes. And if we consider another context, a country where, for instance, the moral and religious tradition has been formed by Islam, So we had for many years, one of the great chief justices of the Supreme Court in Pakistan was a Christian, a very devoted and practicing Christian, but he always said that the development of law in Pakistan could not ignore the maqasid of the Sharia, for example, the moral values of the Sharia. And he gave effect to that in both in the drafting of the constitution and in legislation as it had to develop and be interpreted by the courts. So I don't think there is a contradiction in this, given goodwill and given a proper awareness of what the tradition demands. And sometimes also, of course, a reinterpretation. So this is a continuing task. I mean, in the Christian tradition, the work of St. John Henry Newman has shown both the Catholic tradition and other churches how to deal with modernity from a principled point of view. So it's not saying you can't deal with modernity. It's not like a rejection of modernity, as in the Afghanistan of the Taliban, but it is a principled way of dealing with modernity. Similarly, I feel, I mean, I look forward to what you have to say about this, that a principled way of dealing with the maqasid of the Sharia, with elements like Rai and Qiyas in the tradition of law in Islam, can provide for a way of dealing with modernity in Islamic contexts. Orthodoxy as a whole needs to develop a way of dealing with changing circumstances. I very much value the Orthodox Church's commitment to tradition. And this commitment to tradition with a capital T, if you like, has then also to be related to the circumstances around us.
Thank you very much for that.
If you allow me, Ghassan, I have a question very related to this. And I would like to use our friend Bertie's question and my question together. So he's asking about the possibilities of separating religions and from political issues. And I would like to add to this question what you mentioned earlier regarding the prophetic voice, especially developed by Brueggemann.
Yeah.
And my question is, how can Brueggemann's vision of prophetic imagination or voice, how can this help Christians and Muslims articulate a shared vocation of critique and hope? And how might this be understood or seen as another common element within both traditions, Christianity and Islam?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the cumulativeness of tradition is very important for us to see. So in the first 400 years of the Church's history, the Church was using a prophetic stance against both the Roman and the Persian empires where it was spreading. And even after that, those people who remained faithful to the Christian point of view opposed even so-called Christian emperors in some of the things that they were doing. For example, massacres or the assassination of people they did not like, and so on. That should continue to happen. We should be aware of that. In recent years, comparatively recent years, the witness of the confessing church in Germany, for instance, where they could not accept the attempt by the Nazis to reconfigure Christianity according to their ideology and rejected its claims. So I think we can give many examples. There are, of course, some examples are not directly political, but are nevertheless very powerful. So Francis of Assisi's example of renouncing any attempt at coercing people and simply showing love and trying to reach people with love is something that has always appealed to the imagination of people of many different religions. Yeah, I think the danger with the prophetic is that it can become unloving. And that dimension of love, we should not, both the Sufis and the Christian mystics remind us again and again of the primacy of love. Love does not mean liking somebody necessarily, but does mean seeking the highest good. And that is what our orientation should be, whether we are relating to the state or to another community or to another person, is always to be seeking the highest good. This does not always mean agreeing with them. It may make us uncomfortable. There may even be conflict, but we must never forget that dimension.
Is this a lack of love or lack of demonstrating love? Was it the cost Old Testament prophets paid when they opposed the political establishment of their day?
Of course, and that is true, and we must be prepared to pay that price, indeed. But, and many of us have an experience of doing just that. But at the same time, we should seek to build, this is going back to Dr. Ghassan's point, we must build bridges to those who are in government or who have some kind of authority. I find that what is happening in Indonesia, I don't know if there are any participants from Indonesia today.
Yes, we have some.
Yeah, but I think the attempts by people like Nur Kholish Majid and other Muslim scholars in Indonesia to provide a way of the different religions in Indonesia influencing, not determining, but influencing through dialogue, government policy, government legislation, social relationships, is a worthwhile one for all of us to learn from.
Monsignor, I have a question regarding a point you raised earlier, and it has to do with numbers. You mentioned that the majority of world's believers are either Christians or Muslims. So yes, of course, is the future of global peace in our hands? And if so, how to practically work towards achieving global peace as people of faith?
Yeah. Well, it is, in many ways, in many parts of the world, not everywhere, it is in our hands. And the first step is dialogue amongst ourselves so that we know what it is that we are working for. For instance, a common commitment to the UN Declaration of Human Rights that I mentioned. But at the same time, I think Dr. Ghassan's comment about the bridges that are necessary to talking to the states, that is very important for us to have those bridges. And he mentioned structure. I don't know if it is structure is the right word, but I'm thinking of a more organic way of relating, because structures tend to freeze and ossify. But some regular exchange of views between Muslims and Christians together with governments both in the West and in the Islamic world would be very fruitful, I believe. This has not happened as much as it should. It has happened from time to time in Egypt, and I think that we can see some of the fruit of that. It needs to happen on a much wider scale than that. But it has to be done together. I mean, this is the point, not against one another, from a common commitment. Maybe some kind of document needs to be produced that shows that commitment. That would itself be very encouraging for people to see that it exists. So I don't think that it is out of the question, but as long as we can do it together, I think that's the point.
Monsignor, thank you. I think the time is slowly running out. Maybe if not structures, I always thought of salons in the full sense of the term.
Yeah.
We went too far into politics, probably even geopolitics, which is not the substance of NCCMR, but it was tremendously enjoyable and very edificatory. I very much enjoyed it, and I thank you again wholeheartedly. And on behalf of our audience, thank you very much. I leave the word to Dr. Wajid.
Thank you again, Monsignor Michael Nadir Ali. We really enjoyed it, and thank you for your insights, for the discussions. Thank you, Ghassan, my dear colleague, for moderating and for your insights as well. We have another webinar coming up in May. We have not heard from our speaker yet regarding the date, but please be on the look for emails coming from the network. We will update you with the exact date and the exact theme of the lecture. It will be Professor Juan Pedro from the University of Cordoba in Spain. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and please don't forget to visit nccmr.org. Have a great day.